Breaking: Nnamdi Kanu rushes to Court of Appeal to stop November 20 judgment. Drama unfolds in Abuja. Hello my people, welcome back to GistAngle, where we break down trending stories and national gist in plain language. Now, today's gist is about a fresh twist in the long-running case of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, better known as IPOB. Just when everyone thought the Federal High Court was finally ready to deliver judgment on November 20, Kanu has made a surprise move. He has rushed to the Court of Appeal in Abuja, asking them to stop that judgment from even happening. Sounds dramatic, right? But let's unpack it slowly. So here is the background. Some days ago, the Federal High Court in Abuja, presided over by Justice James Omotosho, announced that it would deliver its long-awaited judgment in Kanu's case on November 20, 2025. This case, as we know, is about several terrorism-related charges the federal government brought against Kanu, charges that have dragged for years now, with several delays and appeals along the way. Now, instead of waiting for the judgment, Kanu quickly filed a new motion before the Court of Appeal, saying, "Hold on, this trial shouldn't even get to the judgment stage yet." Now, why the appeal? According to Kanu, the trial at the Federal High Court is invalid because, as he claims, some of the charges were filed under a law that has already been repealed. In other words, he's saying the court is using a law that technically doesn't exist anymore. That's a big claim, because if that's true, then any judgment based on such a law might not stand legally. He also says that the trial court refused to address some of his key objections, like questions about jurisdiction and fair hearing before fixing a date for judgment. So to him and his lawyers, allowing the judgment to go ahead would violate his right to a fair trial. Now let's connect the dots. On November 7, the trial court fixed November 20 for judgment, but just 3 days later, on November 10, Kanu's legal team allegedly filed an emergency motion at the Court of Appeal, asking the higher court to pause the High Court from proceeding. So basically, he's saying, before you give that judgment, please let the appeal court decide whether the trial itself followed the law. If the appeal court agrees, the High Court will have to wait, but if it disagrees, then the November 20 judgment will go on as planned. So what's the big deal about this? This is not just about one man's case. Kanu's matter has always carried heavy political and emotional weight, especially in the southeast. Many of his supporters see him as a freedom fighter, while others view him as someone whose actions allegedly caused tension and unrest. So a judgment in this case isn't just a legal matter. It's a national talking point that could easily affect public peace. That's why this fresh appeal has drawn so much attention. Now let's gist the main points Kanu is relying on. 1. Repealed law argument. He says the 6 major counts in the charge sheet are built on a law that has already been repealed, meaning, according to him, the court no longer has the legal ground to rely on it. 2. Supreme Court directive. Kanu also claims that the trial court failed to follow a clear directive from the Supreme Court concerning one of the charges, specifically count 7. 3. Fair hearing issue. He insists that the court didn't properly hear his objections before moving straight to fixed judgment, which he says is unfair and unlawful. These are serious legal points, and that's why he's asking the appeal court to step in before things go further. Now, what happens if the appeal court agrees? If the Court of Appeal decides to grant Kanu's request, that means the November 20 judgment won't hold. The case will be paused, giving both sides more time to argue the legal points in detail. That could stretch things out for months or even longer, depending on how fast the court moves. But if the appeal court refuses to stop the process, then Justice Omotosho and the Federal High Court will go ahead and deliver judgment as scheduled. Whatever the outcome, both sides can still appeal, but the timing will change everything. Now let's talk about how people are reacting to this. From Kanu's supporters, there is a sigh of relief. They see the appeal as a smart legal move, a way to prevent what they call a hurried judgment. But others are saying, this is just another delay tactic. They believe Kanu's team is simply buying time to drag the matter further. Within legal circles, opinions are divided. Some lawyers think Kanu has a valid point that any judgment based on a repealed law could be shaky. Others believe the trial court was right to continue, especially since the Supreme Court earlier ruled that Kanu should face trial again after his previous release was overturned. So here we have a real debate: law versus procedure, and justice versus delay. Now my people, let's look at this matter from another angle. What does all this really mean for the Southeast, politically, emotionally, and socially? This might not just be about Kanu alone. It might shape how people from the region continue to relate with the federal system. For years now, many in the Southeast have felt politically sidelined, so every development around Kanu tends to reopen that old wound of trust between the people and the government. If the Court of Appeal sides with Kanu, it might restore some level of confidence that justice can still be served through the courts. But if it goes the other way, some people might see it as proof that the system is against them, whether true or not. That's why this case carries emotional weight far beyond the courtroom. Now, what are the legal implications? Legally speaking, this situation might also test how flexible our justice system can be. Should a man be tried under a law that allegedly no longer exists, as Kanu's lawyers are claiming? Or should the court focus more on the substance of the case rather than the technicalities of the law? If the appeal court rules that the repealed law argument holds water, it might set a new precedent that could affect other ongoing cases. But if it rules otherwise, it might signal that the court prioritizes continuity over procedure, that once a case starts, it must finish regardless of legal updates. Either way, this is a defining legal moment. Now let's look at the broader impact. Imagine the ripple effect. If tensions rise again in the Southeast after November 20, that could affect businesses, movement, and security across the region. And if calm is maintained, it might show maturity, that even strong emotions can be managed through lawful means. It might also shape how future activists or regional leaders handle disagreements, whether to use the court or the streets. At the end of the day, this is a story about law, trust, and patience. The courts have their process, the people have their expectations. And Kanu, well, he's standing in the middle of both worlds, fighting a legal battle that might redefine not just his fate, but also how the Southeast relates with the center. Whatever the outcome, one thing is clear: this case continues to test Nigeria's democracy and our ability to handle sensitive national issues with fairness and understanding. So that's the full gist for today, my people. Nnamdi Kanu is not backing down, and neither is the federal government. It's now up to the Court of Appeal to decide if the November 20 judgment will hold or be put on pause. What do you think? Should the appeal court stop the judgment until Kanu's arguments are heard? Or should the trial go on as planned and let him appeal later if needed? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the way we break down the news here, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next update.
It's GistAngle.